What up, everybody, and welcome back to the Wilson Dittman Sports Channel here on YouTube, where we talk about everything related to Nebraska football, whether that's recruiting, whether that's players, whether that's staff, right here on this channel. So if you like the content, please hit the like button and subscribe. But we got another episode for you breaking down the position groups. If you haven't seen the first episode, we broke down the quarterback position. That'll be linked in the description below. So check that out first. But without further ado, let's get into the running backs. And really, what's interesting about this running back room is it's a three-way competition for running back one. We have the incumbent starter who started most of the year last year, Anthony Grant, Gabe Ervin, who started in 2021 before he got injured and played a little bit last year, but he plays a true freshman in 2021. And then we have Rahmir Johnson, who's played basically his entire career, but never as running back one, never really substantially. He's been kind of in and out. He plays some weeks and doesn't play some others. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about who I think will be running back one. Let's talk about some guys who we lost, most notably AJ Allen. But let's get into it. And I'll just talk about AJ Allen real quick. I was not happy when we lost AJ Allen. He was a guy who only ran for 200 yards last year, but I mean, that's before he got injured and tore his ACL. Really, he was one of the more athletic players that we've seen at running back. So I think that was definitely a big loss, but I think Gabe Ervin's going to be that dude for us as well, and I think he'll replace him as kind of because they're kind of similar when it comes to athletes. But yeah, both of those guys comparable, but AJ Allen, big loss. I just wanted to mention him. But let's start off with the incumbent starter, Anthony Grant. And really, I mean, you look at his stats, you scroll through 2022 stats, right? And you're saying to yourself, why is this even a conversation? This guy should be running back one. I mean, he had 900 yards last year and 200 carries, averaging 4 yards per carry with 6 touchdowns, and had 100 yards receiving as well. So, I mean, the reason why, let's just break it off. I mean, the reason why he is not the incumbent starter is the regression that we saw throughout last year. He got banged up, but this guy was, let's talk about the start of the season. I mean, he had 100 yards, 200 yards, 130 yards, 36 yards against Oklahoma, but 136 yards. This is a guy who really showed up when we played bad teams. I mean, and then you saw when we played number 6 Oklahoma, only 36 yards. I mean, that jumps out at you. And then after that Indiana game, he only had a 100-yard performance one more time this year, and that was against Minnesota. But in the last 3 weeks of the year, right, we played Michigan, we went down to Michigan, 22 yards on 11 carries. Then he had 26 yards on 16 carries against Wisconsin, and then last game of the year against Iowa, he had 6 yards on 14 carries. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that barely sounds real. So, yeah, awful end of the year. And really, I do think he was banged up. The staff didn't really talk about it too much, but, I mean, he was a guy that is a physical running back. We saw it all year. There's multiple clips of him just pile driving guys, trucking dudes. He was really patient in the pocket. I think that's his best attributes. He's patient. He waits for a hole. But really, he's a power running back. But as the year went on, he stopped going to that power aspect of his game. He tried to get fancy. Instead of just running right into people, which he did all year long, I mean, he tried to get fancy. He danced. He tried to juke out guys. I mean, you saw that against Iowa. There was a play that went viral where he wouldn't cross. He got a little dump-off pass, and he wouldn't cross the line of scrimmage. He was too busy trying to dance out a guy and juke him. That's not his game. That's never been his game. That wasn't his game out of JUCO. That wasn't his game at Georgia Tech, where he originally was. And I don't know why, but he had probably the biggest regression of a running back we've seen in a single year ever, like in the last 10 years in Nebraska. That's ridiculous. He was really bad, really abysmal. Another reason why he isn't the incumbent starter this year is really just to see how he matches up in the Satterfield offense. We know that Satterfield's kind of, the way Rule's going this year is going to be a power running attack, and I mean, that really works well for him. I think he'd really excel under center. We never ran under center under Frost. I think he did sell under center, but I think there's other guys like Gabe Ervin who'd also do well. But really, Anthony Grant's a perplexing case. I love to see how he is healthy. But that regression last year, it was notable. It was something we haven't seen in a long time. He also had some fumble issues. I think he had 4 fumbles on the year. Only 1 or 2 of those were lost, but he did have some fumble issues. But yeah, I mean, he was a guy who we thought was going to be a bell cow. Now, I mean, he's not guaranteed anything going into this year. And if A.J. Allen was still on this roster, I firmly believe that A.J. Allen would have been running back 1. But, yeah, so that's Anthony Grant. Again, what he does well, he's a physical running back. He's a Big Ten running back. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is 6 foot, 200 pounds, really thick running back, thickly built. He doesn't get injured really easy. Not too explosive. Doesn't have breakaway speed, but he's a guy who, if you need 5 yards, give it to him right down the middle, and he's going to get you those 5 yards. Injury-wise, that's never really been a concern for him. He was a bell cow in JUCO. He's a bell cow at Georgia Tech. He's really never got injured on a large scale, which we can't say about the next 2 running backs we're going to talk about. That's definitely an advantage for him, but that regression is something you have to talk about. You have to talk about when it comes to Anthony Grant. But, yeah, let's talk about Gabe Ervin next. He's the next guy who I think is competing for this running back 1 job. So let's go to the statistics real quick. Last year, not impressive at all. He only played in 7 games. And he was basically healthy the entire season. Just Frost and Applewhite, man, they were really weird about that running back room last year. We'll talk about Rahmir Johnson, who barely played last year at all, which was very odd. But yeah, on the season, Gabe Ervin only had 20 carries for about 100 yards. In 2021, true freshman year, he had about 40 carries for 125 yards, except for the fact that he got injured against Oklahoma in, I believe, the 3rd game of the year. So, yeah, that's not, take that with a grain of salt, but he looked really good in 2021 before he got injured. 2022, again, didn't really play. Kind of the same thing we saw from him in 2021, but he didn't, the most carries he ever got in, the most carries he got was against Oklahoma last year, and about 60 yards. He had a really good game that game, but we're talking about a guy who's really inconsistent to get on the field. Anthony Grant's a guy who's never got really injured. Gabe Ervin already had a massive ACL injury. Not something you like to see from your running backs. But let's get into what he does well. One of the more athletically gifted guys we've had. This is a track athlete out of high school. He played for Buford in Georgia. Over 1,000 yards rushing there. I think he had 12 touchdowns his senior year of high school. This dude was a really, really good player for one of the best high school programs in Georgia. You see Buford products come out every single year. We had a couple commit to us in the past. So the athletic ability is there. He wasn't, I just said he was a track athlete. He runs about I think he ran a 4.5 out of high school. 6 foot tall. Another thicker built. Running backs, I think he's 220 at 6 foot tall. So that's, pretty good. He's an athletic running back, but also pretty strong. Here's the problem with Gabe Ervin is he does struggle with the intangibles. Anthony Grant's a guy who can wait in the pocket. He can wait and he'll find a hole. Gabe Ervin kind of just, he sees something he likes and boom, right? He sees something he likes and he doesn't wait for the best possible hole. He's kind of just like that as a running back, where patience is a virtue, right? You try to wait, like Derrick Henry. There's a reason why Derrick Henry is one of the best running backs in the NFL. It's not because he's the most athletically gifted. It's because he's the strongest, and he has such a good presence trying to find that hole, being patient. He doesn't have to run to the first little bit of space that he sees. Gabe Ervin kind of struggles with that. That's something that we've seen from running backs in the past. Most notably, Dedrick Mills really struggled with that. He would find any glimpse of space and he'd run through it the first second. And if you wait for half a second more, he'd find the C gap wide open. Or he'd bounce outside and wait for something he didn't need to. Like, that's very similar to Gabe Ervin, the way he plays. That's tough to learn, but when he's athletically gifted as he is, I think with time that'll come. Another thing that he's not great at, though, is pass pro. And this is something that Anthony Grant struggles with, too. These guys are both horrible pass pro running backs. Terrible blocking. You've seen clips and clips and clips of Anthony Grant getting trucked over and over again in pass pro. He was not great. Gabe Ervin less or so, but really bad. There's only one running back we're going to talk about who I think is a really good player in pass pro. It's not even close. Rahmir Johnson, who we'll get to in a little bit. But Gabe Ervin really needs to improve that aspect of his game. He's also not a great receiving threat. Looking at his stats here, yeah, I mean, he had one catch last year, and that was against Iowa. And let's see if I can get to his 2021 stats. But yeah, he barely caught. He barely has opportunities to catch the football, and that's not going to fly in the Satterfield offense. I don't know how much Satterfield's going to use running backs in the passing game, but if we're going to take anything from the South Carolina offense, they're going to be used a lot. They had a couple of guys go to the NFL over the last couple of years who were really big in the pass pro and really big in the receiving game, and that's why I think Rahmir Johnson has a leg up on these guys. But yeah, Gabe Ervin, I mean, but let's go back to what he does well. Athletically gifted. He probably has the best 40 time of any running back in this conversation. Again, I really like the way he's built. We talked about that. Really, he provides us really good ability breaking tackles, along with he has a bag. He really does have a bag. He has a juke move. He has a spin move. Doesn't really use his athleticism as much as he should when it comes to just more physicality, like you see that with Anthony Grant. But he does have a bag of tricks that, I mean, Anthony Grant really doesn't. So that's something he does well, but there is the injury concern, there is the pass pro concern, and really there is the intangibles concern, waiting to find that hole to get the best possible outcome. But really, there's a reason why this guy played as a true freshman. There's a reason why Rule was hyping him up most notably. Like, Rule was hyping him up the second he got here, saying how good Gabe Ervin is. I think this is the most realistic running back one. I really do. I think this is the most realistic option that they'll go to in running back one because of how much of an athletic freak he is. Along with, I mean, he has experience just along with Anthony Grant. And I think he fits the offense probably best in what Rule is trying to go with the power offense, along with mixing in running backs in the pass game. But let's get the last guy who, personally, this is the guy that I want to see on the field a lot. Not maybe as running back one, but I want to see him on the field about every snap. Not every snap, but Rahmir Johnson. Okay, let's get to Rahmir. So yeah, this is a guy who played in 4 games last year. Nobody knows why. This was probably the biggest debacle last year from Frost, was the whole Rahmir Johnson thing. Rahmir Johnson was never hurt last year. He was always available. He played in 4 games. And we're talking about a guy who's played consistently throughout his career. He only played 4 games last year. That was a debacle by Frost. And what was also debacle was the fact that he had, in the last game of the year against Iowa, dude had 12 carries for 52 yards in massive aspects of that game. Like, Rahmir Johnson played awesome in Iowa. That was one of the reasons we won, was Rahmir Johnson. And had a lot of people asking, why was this guy not playing this entire year? Looking at his career statistics, so yeah, this is a guy who's played since he was a true freshman. In 2021, he had 500 yards rushing, 110 carries. This dude really has experience. He had 200 yards receiving that same year. He had a really good year in 2021. I mean, most notably the Michigan game, he was super, super solid. Yeah, he had a great game in that Michigan game. But let's see. We'll try to pull up the stats for that 2020 year. Yeah, I mean, he played really good against Ohio State. Had a really good year against Purdue. He did get injured as later in the year, but this is a guy who, when he was running back one for us, he averaged about 70 yards per game rushing, but was also averaging about 40 yards receiving as well. Like, this guy was really good in 2021 for us before he got hurt. I want to talk really quickly about what he does well, along with, I talked about it just now. Best pass pro receiver on this, or best pass pro running back. This guy, over and over again, he's shown you that he can block guys head on, and he's willing to block. Even though he is a smaller build, I mean, he's 5'10", 190. By far the best blocker on the team. But not only is he the best blocker when it comes to running backs, right? He's the best receiver. And we've seen that over and over and over again. The Michigan game, he had 100 yards receiving in 2021. That was one of the reasons why we were in that game, was Rahmir Johnson. I can't talk about this guy enough and how much I want to see this dude in Satterfield's offense. Satterfield keeps talking about positional flexibility, how he wants his tight ends to play running backs. He wants his running backs to play wide receivers. He wants his wide receivers to play running back, right? There is not a running back on this roster that fits that role more than Rahmir Johnson. This dude can play anywhere. I I've been talking about even putting him in the slot, putting him at more of a Deebo Samuel kind of role, Curtis Samuel type of role. You see that in the NFL where they're wide receivers, but they take snaps and they run the ball in jet sweeps and even line up as running backs. That's the kind of role I want to see Rahmir Johnson play in this offense. And I think he can be lethal in that role. This is not a bell cow running back by any means. This is not a guy who can carry the ball 25 times a game. And I don't think that's how he should be utilized anyways. This is a guy who he should be running in shotgun formations. This guy should only be on the field, as the running back position on third down. This should be a third down running back. I do not want to see Anthony Grant. One thing that would make me so mad last year was when I'd see Gabe Ervin or Anthony Grant in on a third down and 15. When they provide absolutely nothing to us in the pass pro aspect of the game. They're not good blockers, and they sure as heck aren't good receiving running backs. Rahmir Johnson is a guy who we need as our third down running back. That's what he does well. As for what he does bad, I mean, we just talked about it. He's not a bell cow running back. That's not what you're getting from Rahmir Johnson. He's not a physical running back. He's not going to truck anybody. He does have a bag of tricks, but really this is a receiving threat that needs to be utilized. I really don't understand why he wasn't on the field last year. There might have been something going on with the staff and him. He might have been suspended for something. Those details we still don't know. But, this is something I've been frustrated about a long time. This guy is super talented, and we're lucky we didn't lose him to the portal. We're really lucky. This guy should be on the field just as much as every other running back on this roster because he provides us something. He provides us positional flex. He provides us opportunities to be in the slot, to be in that Deebo Samuel type of role. I swear, I will be really frustrated if Rahmir Johnson does not get considerable playing time because he's going into his 5th year here, and he's provided us nothing but, we've seen so much. He's not one of those running backs where, I'll even put Gabe Ervin in this conversation where we've only seen flashes from him, right? Gabe Ervin, he's played good when he's got the opportunity, but we've only seen really flashes from him. Rahmir Johnson, he has had season over season, game over game, shown us what he's strong at, what he's not strong at, but most importantly, why he should be on the field. This is a third down running back. This is a guy who should be in on passing situations, passing downs. This is a guy who is positional flex, should play wide receiver, should play slot, should play more of that hybrid running back. This is him. This is everything they're talking about. And what frustrates me so much is Rule refuses to talk about him. You hear Rule talking about everybody on the roster before Rahmir Johnson. You hear him talking about Gabe Ervin. You hear him about Anthony Gray. You hear him talking about some of the new running backs that we'll get to at the end. Emmett Johnson, for example. But you fail to hear Rahmir Johnson's name. Are you kidding me? It's ridiculous to me. And I can't be the only one who thinks this, that Rahmir Johnson's... it's a fact that he's the best receiving running back on this team. It's a fact that he was the best blocker on this team. It's unbelievable. It's uncomprehendable that if he doesn't get the playing time he deserves. So that's my little rant about Rahmir Johnson. He's one of my guys on this team, meaning one of the guys who I think should break out. A little late for him to break out. Obviously, he is going to his 5th year, but this is a guy who should have been on the field his entire career considerably and should have been on it consistently. And that's Frost's fault. That is Scott Frost's fault, 100%. But yeah, that's my little breakdown of the top 3. I did give you a little bit of preview. I do think Gabe Ervin will be our running back 1. For better or worse, whether you think that's the right move or not, I don't know how I feel about that. Anthony Grant showed me some things within the first couple weeks of last year that we haven't seen from a running back in a long time. But man, that regression really speaks volumes. I do feel some type of way about Gabe Ervin just because he isn't proven. I know he's played well when he's had the opportunity. I know he played well as a true freshman. I know he played well last year when he got snaps, when he got on the field. But I just don't really love putting him at running back 1 over Anthony Grant, who has proven to be solid at times. As for who fits the offense better between the two, that's to be determined. We still don't know where we're going to go with Satterfield. If we're looking at Satterfield's offense from last year, I think Gabe Ervin best fits it. But the way Rule's talking with all this positional flex thing, with smash mouth football. That was not Satterfield's offense last year at all. Wasn't even close to it. So I think they make a lot of adjustments to Satterfield's offense. I think we see more of an Illinois type of look out of offense. And in that case, I think Anthony Grant better fits it. But I still think that they'll go to Gabe Ervin. This is the way they're talking him up. I can't help but think he'll be the first. I can't help but think that when we play Minnesota week 1, he will be the running back on the first snap of the game. Now, as for how they rotate the two, that's to be determined. But when we talk about Rahmir Johnson, needs to be on the field. This is a guy who needs to be on the field. I know I already made my case for him, but this is the best pass pro player on the team when it comes to running back. He's the best receiving threat at running back. He needs to be on the field. And I'm tired of playing this game with Rahmir Johnson because what Frost would do, he'd play him 1 week and he'd play really well, and then he would be absent the next week. Another thing that I want to see Rule do with the running backs, and this is something that infuriated me with Frost. Infuriated me. Because what would happen was Anthony Grant would have a great drive. Okay, last year. He'd have a great drive. We'd just feed the ball to him. He'd go down and score a touchdown. He'd look unstoppable. The next drive, A.J. Allen would go out there. Or Gabe Ervin would go out there. That was unfathomable to me. If you're going to have a bell cow, you stick with him the entire game. You don't switch him every drive. That was unbelievable to me how that would continue to happen. We need to have a consistent presence at running back. Minnesota isn't, for example, with Mo Ibrahim from Minnesota, they didn't pull out Mo Ibrahim and then the next possession they'd have Trey Potts out there. That didn't happen. They'd have Mo Ibrahim every single possession. I don't know why Frost continued to go over that. He continued to do that. And maybe that's something, maybe Anthony Grant struggles with the fatigue aspect. I don't think so. He's, this is a guy who's going into his, I think, 5th year collegiately. Like, he should not struggle with with fatigue. He should not struggle that largely to take him out of an entire possession. I mean, this is why you go through conditioning right now. Like, he should not be struggling with conditioning. That was just a stupid thing by Frost. I mean, that we've seen that he did that his entire time here. Was he'd go away from a guy who was cooking. He'd go away from a guy who was consistently putting up stats for us. That was ridiculous. So that's something I want to see Rule do. If you have a running back 1, put him out there every time. But you have to have a rotation aspect to it because Gabe Ervin needs to be on the field if he's running back 2, and Anthony Grant should be on the field if he's running back 2. But don't forget about Rahmir Johnson. So yeah, that's my little breakdown on the top 3. Real quick, let's talk about the other running backs on this roster. We did lose A.J. Allen, of course. I already talked about him pre-video. Emma Johnson, somebody who's really interesting. 5'11", 190, according to the Huskers website. Coming from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He was really good at senior year of high school. Late bloomer. Didn't really produce at all his junior or sophomore years. But he attended a lot of camps between those junior and senior years. And then his senior year, he was, I think, the number 1 running back in the state of Minnesota statistically. He won Minnesota Player of the Year, all that stuff. Somebody to watch, man. Somebody to watch. If we do get injured in that room, which has been the case the last couple of years, Emma Johnson could make an impact. But other than that, man, this is a bad room. I mean, other than that, and of course, I mean, what should I say? It's not a bad room. But, I mean, very few running back rooms in the country have solid players after the 4 deep. But let's just roll through. I mean, Trevor Lubin, that's a walk-on. Trevor Ruth, walk-on. Cole Ballard, somebody to keep an eye on. He's not going to play right away. He's a walk-on from Elkhorn South. But, I'm a high schooler in the state of Nebraska. I'm going to be a senior. I've watched Cole Ballard every single year. He is so good. So good. And I was like, this guy needs to be a Husker in some capacity. He is going to be a Husker. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't find the field sometime in his career. That is not a normal walk-on. Gage Wager, that's the son of the tight end coach Wager. That's a guy, I'm pretty sure he's a walk-on as well. And then Quentin Ives was a late get last year by the Rule staff. He is a scholarship player. He's a true freshman out of New Jersey. Wasn't a fan of this get at all. That really low 3-star, barely had any offers. Watching his film wasn't impressive. I mean, he didn't really put up the stats you want to see from running backs. I mean, running backs are one of the positions, they're super hard. As they recruit, they're super hard to get recruited because everybody puts up crazy stats at running back. There are so many running backs around the country who put up 1,000+ yards. It's ridiculous. And, I mean, really, let's pull up his stats from last year. Quentin Ives. See if it pops up here. Yeah, his basketball stats pop up. I did not want to see that. Here we go. I'm getting somewhere. I mean, yeah. I mean, the stats were all right last year for him. And again, it's hard to break out as a running back. It's hard to really, like everybody has crazy stats as a running back. He had over 1,000 yards, which is pretty good. 26 touchdowns in a lower division New Jersey school. So, I mean, that's solid, right? But watching his huddle back in January wasn't too impressive. Somebody to watch, though. I trust Rule at the running back position. Hopefully he does, in fact, get some playing time in his career, but wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't. So, yeah, that's the running back room. I should mention Jadarian Bonner. This is a guy who transitioned to tight end, but they're also putting him at running back. They're also putting him at fullback, supposedly. It will be interesting to see what he does there. I was not a fan of this move. I was not a fan of moving him to tight end or whatever they're moving him to. I thought Jadarian Bonner is the classic wide receiver X. Probably the most athletically gifted receiver that we had on this roster. Not only, is he 6'4", 200 pounds, but he also runs really well. I thought this was a really bad move by Rule. But they moved a lot of guys around on this roster. A.J. Rollins moved to defense. They moved a lot of positions around. So maybe this is a good move. I don't think so. I don't even think this is a good move for Jadarian Bonner's career. I fail to see how he's going to make the league at tight end or at running back or whatever they're trying to do with him. So wasn't a fan of that move, but yeah, that's me breaking down the running back. So overall, let's just recap it. Gabe Ervin, I think, will be running back one in some capacity, maybe running back by committee. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but that's something you might have to do with this running back room being as good as it is as in the top three. Now, how does it rank comparatively in the Big Ten? I mean, it's not top 10. The Big Ten's always been stacked at running back. Illinois, let's just go based on the West teams. I think Iowa still has a better room than us. I really like Caleb Johnson. I think Illinois has a better room than us. Wisconsin, of course, has a better room with us, with Brandon Allen being, in my opinion, I think he's going to be the best running back in college football this year. Minnesota's tough because they lose basically everybody in that running back room. So I think we have a better room than them. Same with Purdue. So I'd say we rank about fifth. Northwestern actually does have a sneaky good running back room. So, yeah, I think we rank about fifth in the Big Ten West. But I do think that I still do think this is a really good room. Anthony Grant hopefully does not have that regression that he did last year. And really that might be to bad O-line. The O-line was not great, even though it did get better as the year went on. What's weird about it is the O-line got better as the year went on. Anthony Grant got worse as the year went on. And really, I think Anthony Grant, you look at him from last year, the games where he all had 100-plus yards were against bad teams. Okay, Indiana, Georgia Southern, North Dakota, Northwestern, Minnesota. In Minnesota, you might say, oh, Minnesota's a good team. Well, Minnesota's run defense was awful last year. So, yeah, the only times he had over 100 yards were against really bad defenses. So that's something to watch. And in looking at his stats, it was either he had 100 plus or he had less than 50. There was only one game where he had in between those. That was against Illinois. We had 61, but every other game he had six rushing yards, 29, 22 rushing yards, 35, 47, 36. I mean, that's super inconsistent. So hopefully that doesn't show up again. Gabe Ervin needs to stay healthy. And hopefully we see, just from the intangible standpoint, we see some progress. And Rahmir Johnson, need this guy to be on the field. He is a weapon. I will continue to defend Rahmir Johnson. He's been my guy forever. Probably one of my favorite players on this team. Needs to be on the field. But there we go. There's my breakdown of this running back room. Overall, solid running back room. It's not going to push the needle. And I mean, it's not like you'd expect it to. We were a 4-8 team last year, new coaching staff. It's not going to push the needle, but it's sure as heck not as bad as we've seen in previous years. And hopefully one of those guys does break out. So yeah, that's the video, guys. If you do in fact like it, please hit the like button and subscribe. And again, let me know what you think. If you disagree, if you agree, be awesome to hear your thoughts down below. But that'll do it for me. Go Big Red, everybody, and have a good one.